Welcome back to another episode of Everything NetSuite Accounting. Everything that you need to know. We're here with Susan. Susan's the head of our controller group here at Fusion. And today we're going to be talking about data, getting your data set to go into NetSuite for the first time. And if it's already there already, you might have to take a look at it because, quite frankly, we find all the time that the data that has gone in is not done properly, and then all you're doing is just adding more and more layers of incorrect information. And it becomes a nightmare, and it becomes expensive, and then you call us. So let's get it before the data is not done the way it should be. So, Susan, NetSuite, very different than QuickBooks. How do we get our data properly aligned to go into NetSuite?
Yeah, it really is true, Thor, that there are steps you need to take. And I think the main issue is making sure your data is clean and tight. And so that's about reconciling.
Explain that.
Yeah, it's about reconciling. That's about understanding what is currently in all of your accounts. I tend to take a huge balance sheet approach initially. You need to know if you've got a balance sitting in undeposited funds, what is that? Is that really checks that you have sitting on your desk that haven't gone into the bank? Or has something gotten trapped in undeposited funds? Same thing is true about accounts receivable. If you look at your accounts receivable ledger, first of all, does it match your GL? That happens a lot. If people make journal entries, sometimes those things get a little out of whack. We shouldn't be making journal entries into accounts.
I hate journal entries. I hate them. I don't understand them. I don't like them. I hate them.
Most non-accountant folks feel that way.
Yes.
They have a time and a place, but it's not an AR or AP. AR should be invoices and credit memos. AP should be your bills and your vendor credits. Okay. And that's it. You shouldn't have journal entries in those things. But if you do, you need to resolve those. Somehow those need to be corrected so that when you move over to NetSuite, first of all, your subledger and your ledger match. And second of all, you have a list of invoices or bills that can easily go into NetSuite. And
if we're making the switch from QuickBooks, let's say, to NetSuite, how far back do we need to go? Do we upload all of the, we got 8 years worth of data? Are we uploading that? Or are we just doing a clean cut, finishing QuickBooks and starting a new one?
A great question. And that's open for conversation. I think typically at the moment, NetSuite is willing to pull in balances going back 12 months. So say you cut over on July 1st, they're going to want to go from July 1st to the previous year through June 30th of the current year. I tend to like to have 2 or 3 years of monthly balances because I think from an analysis perspective, you at a minimum want to be able to compare year over year. But a lot of people want to see a 2 or 3 year trend. If you're moving to NetSuite because you eventually want to consider a sale of your business, you're going to want 3 years of data. And it's not hard to go back and add those. That can be done with relative ease. But I like to see, again, if you're cutting over mid-year, like so say you're, again, July 1st, 2025, I would want to pull in everything from a monthly balance perspective for 23 and 24 so that you could have that much data in your system.
So does it matter the size of the company and pulling all that old data over, or is it, look, we're just pulling balances, so it doesn't matter if you're a $10 million company or a $100 million company?
No, I think you just do balances. I mean, there are some people that need the more detailed transaction level data. And that's a whole nother story, right? That's a whole project and can get very, very expensive. But for the most part, when you look at trended analysis, you can go with balances.
Okay, but we can help prospects do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. That's part of the process we go through at Fusion. We pull the balances out of your legacy system. And, the other thing that needs to be done in advance and really, I think, should be considered before you even start the implementation process with NetSuite is going in and looking at your chart of accounts. So that's part of the data migration strategy as well is, are you changing your GL? And if so, you need to get a solid mapping to say that this account goes to this account, or this account goes partially to this account and partially to this account, or the other way around. These two accounts are now going to this account. We've got to get all of that ironed out, really ideally before you start implementing with NetSuite, because once you start the implementation process, they are going to want to keep the pace going. They want to keep you on track. And you don't have a lot of time to do the fixing amidst the implementation process. You might have some time for fine tuning, but the overhaul should be done before you get there. That's not to say we can't do it, but from a pace perspective, it's better if you do it before the implementation process starts.
And out of 100 prospects that are moving from QuickBooks over to NetSuite, what would you say out of that 100, how many have data migration issues?
Out of 100?
Yeah.
100. I mean, everyone needs to have a strategy, right?
Yes, but how many, we've gotten involved later in the process after a lot of this stuff has been done, and now there's a problem, and then we get the phone call.
Right.
What would you estimate? How many are done properly from the beginning?
From the beginning? I don't think many, maybe 5 out of 100.
Wow.
Part of the problem when you go live is that your accounting data is likely not closed at cutover. So if I want to cut over on that July 1st date, it's unlikely that someone's gone in and reconciled your bank account as of June 30. I mean, if you have someone who's up all night or in a different time zone, you might be able to work that out. So there's always a little bit of messiness that has to be, but we want to keep it to that little bit of messiness. So, the team needs to work hard in the last maybe 5 days of the month to make sure all of the payments that have come in have been applied. Best practice is also to pay out as many of your bills, maybe a week before cutover, so that all of that is clean, and then maybe stop entering new bills so that the new bills only get put into NetSuite or your new system. This is true of almost all, data migrations from system to system. Having this clean a cutoff as possible is really critical.
Yeah. And one thing that we always emphasize with all of our prospects as they're going through this process is please remember that NetSuite is an amazing system. And the people you're working to put this system together are really software engineers, not accounting people. They may look like accounting people, they may use the lingo, but every single time we find that they're not really looking at a lot of these things from an accounting or CPA or GAAP perspective. So it's really important. We like to kind of walk alongside of you during the implementation. It saves a lot of time and a lot of money. Now, not everyone we catch at that moment, but we always get the phone call that something's not done the way it should be done. So the key to the data is reconciled and having a cutoff point that is reconciled as close to as possible as the cutover.
Right. Correct.
Okay. What else about the data?
I think then becomes the issue of understanding maybe how NetSuite is going to treat data slightly differently than QuickBooks. A lot of people that are migrating from QuickBooks to NetSuite are in the manufacturing or even distribution lines of business where they're really about to revolutionize how they look at cost of sales. Most people who are in QuickBooks, not all, because there are people who are using inventory on QuickBooks, but that's more from QuickBooks Desktop. They're usually in siloed systems, right? And so there's just journal entries that are being made. And there's often then a timing disconnect that just once you get into NetSuite, becomes completely different, right? It's the way that if you study like management information systems in college, it's the things flow through in NetSuite the way that they're supposed to flow through. But you're going to have to understand a little bit of the old version versus the new version and make sure that your data is ready to come over. The subledgers as a whole matching. So that's a whole nother layer. If you have inventory, does that subledger match your general ledger? And there can be disconnects. In fact, I would say most of the times there's a disconnect unless you have somebody going in and looking at that on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis to make sure that things are correct.
And are you building that inventory in your factory or in your, in your facility using raw goods? And then after the raw goods are all put together, they create the inventory.
Right, right, exactly.
The
So
system will allow you to manage that process very well if configured correctly.
correct.
Good. Anything else on data?
I think that pretty much sums it up.
All right. Well, if you find yourself in a situation where the data just doesn't seem to make sense, please reach out to Susan, and we'd love to schedule a call and figure out how to get it fixed for you.